I mentioned that the network is kind of the slow point of moving your data around, but what about redo? And the first thing we want to think about with redo, because remember, we have those users accessing the source database when we're setting up the standby, for example. So we're going to generate redo that has to be synchronized onto the standby. But how much redo do you generate? Well, that's something you're going to need to measure so that you know how much redo has to be shipped across the network and then applied on the other side. And it used to be that redo apply was a potential bottleneck, especially if you have a highly loaded rack database with earlier versions before multi-instance redo apply came into being. Now, it wasn't really a limiting factor in most cases because, as you can see here, the benchmarks that we had, we could easily keep up with 10, 15, even 50 terabytes of redo apply on a single node on a robust Exadata, for example. But if you have a super high-end system, then you might need to get into multi-instance redo apply, which is thankfully available now for you when you go into, say, 19C. And as you can see here, when you have a rack environment, such as an Exadata or even rack with commodity hardware, multi-instance redo apply scales nearly linearly across all the nodes in your rack now. So that's a big win when you're trying to synchronize a very active database. So if CPU and storage performance on your destination system isn't the limiting factor, what is? Well, it's the network. If you're going to move data across the network, you have to have the bandwidth to do it. So here's a quick back of the envelope calculation for you about how many gigabits per second you have to be able to move in order to have redo generation in terms of terabytes per day applied effectively onto your standby system. So the way to read this table is the number to the left of the slash, that's terabytes per day of generated redo. To the right of the slash, the yellow number, is gigabits per second of network connectivity. So in order to move 15 terabytes per day, you need a 2 gigabit connection to your standby system to make sure the redo will get there in time. Now, that's the minimum that you need. You should always plan for overhead and for extra utilization of that network, because otherwise, if you've got other databases on the network, you've got other jobs going on, like backing up to a NAS device or something like that, you're going to need that extra capacity in order to get the data where it needs to go in an effective time span. Finally, when it comes to redo, moving it over the network, again, think about compression. Another part of the advanced compression option allows you to compress the redo when it is sent over the network. Now, you're not going to get a 5-to-1 or 4-to-1 compression ratio with redo, but we have measured anywhere from 35 to 65% reduction in redo volume if you compress your redo network traffic. So that can be another good way to make your migration as efficient as possible.